We got such a big group on stage this week. This is so great.
Real party up here. I'm just doing a quick. Tell me a funny joke so I can test my recording.
Oh gosh. Can I ask GPT chat for a funny joke?
Oh yes, this whole game has changed now, actually.
Give me a funny dad joke. Let's see what it says. Okay.
The recording works, by the way, but let's finish the joke.
Give me a funny dad joke. I'm asking GPT chat. Okay. Let's see. It says. Okay. Sure, here's a classic one. Why don't I know. Why don't scientists trust atoms?
They make up everything.
Ah,
I know that one.
you know that one. It's a classic.
We got to turn the temperature up. This bot is getting stale.
I just asked GPT as well. So why did the tomato turn red?
I don't know.
Because it saw the salad dressing.
Oh, that's a good one too.
And it
That's
also
good.
says
I'm groaning.
classic dad joke.
That's good.
It's good.
Oh, I love this thing.
At last we have the infinite supply of dad jokes that we've been waiting for.
Yeah, I just typed in more classic dad jokes. I don't have to say anything else. And now it's giving me at least 3.
I've done this before. My favorite thing to do if you do this is to tell it to do it as a tweet specifically, and
Oh,
it'll throw in all of these like ridiculous hashtags.
nice.
It's exactly the same except it adds ridiculous hashtags.
That's so funny. Yeah, I want someone to just make a Twitter stream of like ridiculous chat GPT prompts. That's mostly Twitter right now anyways.
I've got a radio one. Ready?
Let's
Yeah.
go.
Why did the radio break up with his girlfriend?
Maybe something about reception. I feel like there's a reception joke in here, maybe. I don't know.
Frequencies? She wasn't around enough?
They weren't on the same frequency?
Oh.
That's it.
Oh,
We're on the
yes.
same frequency.
we don't need AI. We can solve jokes.
Yeah, we just need 12 adults in a room and we'll figure out the answer.
That's right.
Adults, come on. Insulted.
Air quotes right around that one.
Yeah.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Helium community call.
I know. Well, let's get started. I'm still bringing up everyone on stage. We'll have a little packed stage here, but that's great. We'll just move from one thing to the next because we got a lot to cover, which is a good thing. So, I just want to start with Scott, and Scott's going to give us just an overview of Solana transition, just kind of remind us what's going on and give us kind of any big updates. Let me also real quick, I'll just go through the agenda that we're going to do. We'll do just this sort of Solana update. We'll have the Open LNS give us an update about the data transfer oracles from Victor and Seth. And then we'll go into HIP 77 and HIP 80. HIP 80 changed from Chris's original HIP 78, so you'll see that. And then we will go into, bringing up my agenda, we'll go into updates from the IoT working group and mobile working group. We'll do a grants update. We'll have Teague show us a Helium Hacks happy hour, or just give us a reminder of Helium Hacks happy hour. Oh, we also have Sophie talking about MCC. We'll do that after Victor and Seth's update on Open LNS. And I think that is all we'll go through. So yeah, Scott, if you want to take it away, we'll start with the Solana migration update. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for joining today, especially for all of our top of the hour dad jokes. Always, again, glad to see the culture continues. So, leading with the important news, Solana migration is locked in. April 18th will begin at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So that is final. No more delays. No more postponement, that is officially locked in and good to go. For those who have been following along, Foundation had initially proposed a late March date and stood up the Readiness Working Group a couple of months ago. And we have been meeting weekly. So the Readiness Working Group, you're talking about a makeup of good cross-section in terms of manufacturers, distributors, host networks, let's see here, service providers, validators. I'm like literally scanning through the list right now. So healthy cross-section of the community to really evaluate, where we're at. One, giving us some accountability around the technical work that's been completed, looking at documentation, sufficient and adequate educational resources. So we met with that group again. So that's been weekly on Thursdays. You can also follow along in the Fishbowl channel that we have. I think that is under governance in Discord here. But effectively had a vote, and majority of the Readiness Working Group felt that there were a few things that needed to be in place to push from the original March date. And then we had healthy consensus there on April 18th as the final date. So that's locked in. We're set there. We have been pushing that messaging out, you've probably seen across a few different channels. Also been in touch with a number of the outside, third-party providers that interact with the network to make sure everybody is ready and looking good there. So Christina from the Foundation team has, confirming with makers that apps will be live in time on respective stores, iOS and Android. Also been in touch with exchanges to make sure that they are going to be ready. Got a couple public announcements there. Again, pretty typical in the kind of crypto ecosystems that those exchanges, given that they're working with such a large number of projects, tend to push off those announcements till week out. But we are hearing mostly confidence across the board there, and a few other verbal confirmations. So certainly looking good there. Clean audit. So we did receive the first instance of the audit weeks ago, worked through the issues, and now that is fully clean. Abino, since I got you guys up here, have we posted that yet, or when is that being shared? Sorry, a lot of moving parts. I'm just trying to remember if the audit has actually been pushed up yet.
Yeah, so the audit was posted. It's Sec3 actually tweeted about it. We retweeted it on Twitter. It's on our docs repo. Don't know if we have it in the Helium program library repo as well on GitHub, but it's certainly been posted in a couple of different places.
So thanks, Abhi. And then as far as, kind of ongoing work on our side, we are, working on a few more educational materials this week to help folks with migration. So a few new videos that are being produced this week to help folks migrate across wallets. We'll continue to meet with the Readiness Working Group weekly on Thursdays and posting those updates in the Fishbowl channel. For anything related, Solana migration questions, that channel is still active. Please feel free to post in there. If there's anything that remains confusing, we can either direct you to docs, improve docs, and kind of address those questions as we're continuing to boost on the FAQs and available resources that we have for the entire community. So that's effectively it. Again, major news, April 18th is locked in. We'll kick off at 9 a.m. Pacific. There'll be the 24-hour transition period. But we are looking good on our side.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. We are just going to roll right into our next topic. Again, we got a lot to cover this hour. So Victor and Seth, thanks for joining us from the Nova Labs team. Victor and Seth have been working on the data transfer oracles, and so they're just going to tell you about our progress made there, and also give us a rundown of what an oracle is, and talk about OpenLNS and what that gives us. So Seth and Victor, please take it away.
Yeah, of course. I'll kick us off first here this morning. First of all, if we haven't met, my name is Seth, and I work on the product marketing team over at Nova Labs. We were invited, of course, to spend a couple minutes discussing the recent HIP 70 data transfer architecture, as well as, like Valerie mentioned, discuss a little bit about the oracles. So I'll start by highlighting some of the more high-level goals and ideas, then I'll pass the mic over to Victor to talk more about the technical aspects and engineering work. So if you missed it, there was actually an announcement in the Discord last Wednesday, which essentially kicked off the data transfer architecture launch. If you haven't seen that post, I highly encourage you to take a look at it. But to keep it short and sweet, this upgrade is super exciting because it decouples blockchain operations from the network's IoT data transfer. And Victor will go more in depth on that here in just a moment. Like Val kind of mentioned before, this upgrade was a major driver towards the Open LNS initiative, which has been mentioned a few times before. I'll quickly plug the really good blog that was posted by the foundation. If you haven't read that, I highly encourage you to do so. It also has a really great visual graphic that outlines I guess I'll call it the process of events going forward as it relates to the actual data transfer architecture. But the overall goal of OpenLNS is to essentially further decentralize the network while also, of course, improving the performance of data transfers as a whole. One major aspect of this is increasing the network's accessibility, which for the ecosystem means that users can onboard sensors and devices to any Helium-compatible LoRaWAN network server available, basically. There are plenty of other aspects and benefits as well, but I'll let Victor go more in depth on those.
Thank you, Seth. Also, first time speaking here, super excited. I am a product manager at Nova Labs and mostly have been leading the off-chain data transfer architecture launch. And before I talk about the upgraded ushered in by the HIP-70 data transfer architecture, I just want to do a quick refresher on what the current architecture looks like. Yeah, if I have to put it into one sentence about the current architecture, I would say that the blockchain operation is kind of in the middle of data transfer. And there are three pretty good examples of that. So one is the hotspots that directly talk to the Helium console, and that involves a handshake process that involves state channel, which is a blockchain element. And the second example is any new device that joins the network will need to go through a blockchain element called XOR filter, which means that you have to wait for 20 or 30 minutes before your device can even join. And the last one is you can't really use any other LNS on the market right now because the LNS needs to be a blockchain node under the current architecture. So those were the design decisions made back then with a very different set of requirements and constraints. And they've been the trusted backbone that really took us to where we are today. But as we look forward to the future of the Helium network, we ask ourselves, what is the network architecture that we need to unlock more growth, more data transfer, more IoT application that could potentially handle trillions of data packets flowing through on the Helium network smoothly? And to us, the answer is to decouple the blockchain and data transfer plane, like what Seth said. So instead of making blockchain operation in the middle of data transfer, we make them work in parallel. So in a new off-chain data transfer architecture, the data flows from sensor, gets picked up by hotspots, and they get all routed to a component called packet router. And at the exit of the packet router, it simultaneously sends the packet to an LNS as well as to the reward oracles, which deals with blockchain. So that is what we mean by decoupling the blockchain data transfer plane. Now, hotspots don't have to figure out where to go, hence they're more efficient and they're doing their only one job really, really well, which is routing packets, and blockchain is not in the middle of data transfer anymore. Now you might be wondering, okay, so how does packet router know where to send each packet, right? Because these information, such as device address and join EUI pairs, used to be on chain. Now there's another service that supports it, which is called the config service. You can think of config service like the brain of the packet router, telling it where to route each packet. If you think of packet router like a UPS office, then config service is like the address book, telling it where to send each packet or receipt. Happy to answer more questions, but again, if I have to condense it into one sentence about the new architecture, I would say that it was able to achieve superior speed, scalability, and reliability because it decoupled and or parallelized data transfer and blockchain, so they will never step on each other's toes.
Awesome. Thank you, Victor and Seth. I feel like we need a whole session on what you said to ask questions about because I find it so interesting and I bet other people do. If we had more time here, I feel like we could take a few questions, but I don't think we can. So maybe we can get you on to do another kind of separate, let's like really deep dive with the community on data transfer. But thank you guys for joining. So Awesome. We're
Thank you.
gonna
Happy
just,
to do that.
yeah, thank you. We're gonna move on to Sophie. So Sophie, thanks for being here as well. And Sophie's gonna give us some updates about the Manufacturers Compliance Committee and kind of give us an overview of what y'all are doing.
Thanks, Valerie. Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Kravitz. I'm a foundation employee and member of the MCC for about the past year plus some. And so I actually have a lot to get through, and perhaps, Valerie, we could do questions off asynchronously on the chat, because I think there might be some. I'll also post some links. So I have, as a summary, I'm going to give an update on dual mining, which has been a discussion this week and the end of last week. Maker onboarding fees for makers that have exited the network. Firmware subscriptions, light hotspot update, and a secure concentrator update. So I'll start with dual mining because that's probably the biggest update. A few months ago, or several months ago, the MCC discussed dual mining, and that's defined as 2 or more processes on the same hotspot that are mining tokens, or that was our definition at the time. And in 2021, we did not allow a maker, or did not approve a maker who proposed dual mining for tokens to join the network. But at that time, we didn't formally document this decision because it hadn't really come up before, and it didn't seem that it was continue to come up. Last week, in response to dual mining coming up quite a lot, we created an addition to the ethics doc, which stated, and I'm reading, dual mining is only permitted so long as it does not conflict with a DY network. We defined a DY network as any decentralized wireless network running on a blockchain and issuing tokens. Examples include LoRaWAN, CBRS, Wi-Fi, etc. Dual mining on a hotspot or on another decentralized wireless network in a way that is competitive with the growth of Helium networks is not allowed. And so with that addition, there was a fair amount of makers and community members who questioned our decision. And so we, in response, arranged an immediate discussion. And we put out the addition to the ethics document on Friday, and our discussion was on Monday. And so MCC makers and 3 makers who would be affected by this decision attended and presented. So we heard arguments on both sides. We heard why dual mining is good for hotspot owners' earnings, as well as maximally using hotspots. And we heard technical reasons why dual mining will degrade the network it is running on, the Helium network. We heard, I'm reading this definition, LoRaWAN consists of both gateway logic and core centralized network server logic. If multiple networks are given the ability to control the gateway, there will be logic conflicts resulting in glitches and bugs. So we've got quite a lot of reasons on both sides. And where we are at right now, we're looking at regulations. The MCC is looking at regulatory issues starting with the FCC, and I'll post a link to this in the chat. And it's really about looking at the hotspot as a whole entity, which is what FCC, which is the US regulations, radio regulations, and of course there are regulations in Europe and in other parts of the world. But we are looking at it as a full transmission system, which must always be marketed as a complete system and used in the configuration in which it was authorized. And I'm paraphrasing from the FCC Title 47, Part 15. This meeting that we had on Monday was recorded, and the MCC hopes to have a statement as soon as possible. I can promise you all that behind the scenes, we're working on it pretty hard. So let me just go ahead and post a link to this in the chat, to this first to the recording from our meeting on Monday.
And we'll also put it in these the notes too. If you
Great.
go to Helium, helium.foundation/community-call.
Okay.
Thank you,
And then,
Sophie.
yeah, let me just put this. Thanks, Neil. I see everyone's in Amsterdam at a conference. Yeah, I wish I was at that conference right now. Okay, I'm going to move on to Maker exit onboarding fees update. We are working on an official response to this as well, but I'll just define the 3 types of hotspot owners that result when manufacturers leave the network. We have onboarded hotspots, which are left with no technical support. They are already onboarded that have had their onboarding fees paid, and now they're taken over by a new business owner. We have hotspots that hotspot owners or customers buy, and they have not been onboarded, and there's a fee for that. And then the third type is hotspots that have been onboarded, but they have not had their locations asserted. So the fee is onboarding is $40, the location assert is $10, paid in DC. So we've been tossing around solutions. We realize this is a pretty serious issue affecting the community. Many people own hotspots that they're not able to onboard. And one or two of the things that we've discussed is, the foundation is an existing maker. We have an approved maker key. Foundation could potentially onboard these hotspots using our key, or we can continue using the maker who left the network's key. And so we're working on a process now, and perhaps by the next community call, we'll have an actual update or solution. Okay, I don't think I have any links here that I can post for an update.
Will the community get like an announcement from y'all when you do have a further decision on that? Can we
Yes,
expect that? Okay.
100%. It'll be in community announcements.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, we can post it in, if anyone has suggestions of other channels that they'd like us to post it in, that's fine. Okay, the rest of these updates are pretty short. MCC has discussed firmware maker firmware subscriptions. We've had a few makers that are considering adding a cost either to their hotspots or a monthly, like a SaaS subscription. And this is to cover the cost of engineering firmware that requires updating. So makers that charge a subscription fee for firmware upgrade, this is absolutely approved as long as this fee is outlined to customers at the time of purchase. So it's not okay for a maker to retroactively decide to charge a hotspot owner, but it is fine if they do it at the time of purchase, and the customer is aware of what they're buying. I think that's pretty standard for all things that people buy. Light hotspot update. Several makers have been approved, and would-be hotspot owners should see these less expensive hotspots on the market very soon. Finally, a secure concentrator or SCC update. I can also put a link to HIP 72 in the chat. Valerie, what channel are people talking about it? I saw HIP 73 somewhere. Is it HIP 72 or HIP 73?
It's HIP 72. There's still an open HIP channel for HIP 72.
Okay, I saw someone point someone to HIP 73. Okay, so the main update here is that this HIP is ready for a vote, and it's going to go to vote as soon as the Solana migration is complete. The update to the HIP, if anyone would like to go back and read it, is that we added or Paul, the author of the HIP, added additional language around manufacturing to make it clear that makers can include secure concentrators in their hotspots, or that hotspot owners can swap out their existing concentrators, because it's made to fit in both cases. It's made to be form-fitting. I don't think I'm using the right word there. You can swap out your concentrator for the secure concentrator, and the proposed rewards for having that on your hotspot are 1.25x. And that's my update.
Is there an update to that HIP too, Sophie, for some sort of staking component?
I don't think so.
Okay. I might be getting my HIPs mixed up.
Yes, I think we're talking about a different HIP.
Okay.
And I can't remember which hip that is that has the staking.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you, Sophie. That was a lot. So we've put it down in our notes, and I'll edit these notes so that this update makes more sense just from what I've typed. But thank you so much, Sophie, for giving this, and look forward to seeing kind of the announcements come out from the MCC.
Okay. Thanks.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, we are now getting into more HIP territory. So we have Chris here to talk about HIP 80. So this is a change from HIP 78, which Chris initially opened to make a change to the mobile sub-DAO onboarding fees. Chris, you can give the background, but sort of it sounds like you talked with some more people, you talked with HIP 51 authors, decided that it made more sense to sort of scrap the onboarding fees and actually make some changes to the DAO utility score altogether, which I think it sounds like you're addressing the same problem, but from a different perspective, different solution to the same problem. So would love to give you the floor to talk about HIP 80, and then we'll go into talk a little bit about HIP 77 too. So Chris, take it away.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. First of all, thanks all for your participation in HIP 76. We had lots of lively discussion there, and I think we all found a pretty good consensus. And Valerie just opened the HIP 80 channel. So everybody pile in there and let's have a discussion too. I'll be unfortunately away today, but Arman is also coming on as a co-author of this HIP. And he said he will be available sometimes to discuss and answer questions and fight with y'all. So let's have it. Anyway,
yeah, I'll be around. I'll be around today to discuss the HIP with anyone who.
That's great. So this got started as HIP 78, and actually thanks to Waveform, to Adrian, for bringing this up quite a few times in the past and trying to get people interested. And it took a while, but we finally took a look at the question of the onboarding fees for mobile hotspots, which are defined in HIP 53. It says mobile hotspots are supposed to pay a $40 onboarding fee, just like LoRa. But if you look at the implementation, what actually happened is that all the hotspots that have been shipped contain both a 5G component and a LoRa component, so starting from the FreedomFi hotspots. And what actually got implemented was they onboarded their LoRa part, and the mobile part just worked by magic. And since HIP 51 defines the DAO utility score, which describes how the total HNT minted by the Helium DAO blockchain will be distributed to the different sub-DAOs, and that considers the number of onboarded hotspots that are active in each sub-DAO and the onboarding fees paid by these hotspots. It turns out that we're in a bit of a pickle there because if you actually look closely, the LoRa hotspots have all been paying a bunch of. Sorry, I'm getting a call here. Let me. Yes. The LoRa hotspots have all been paying $40 for each hotspot, and the 5G gateways have not been paying any onboarding fees. And if you look at the way the DAO utility score is defined, that's supposed to divide the HNT mint between the sub-DAOs, basically the mobile sub-DAO wouldn't be getting any HNT when we launch, because the factor that considers the number of hotspots times the onboarding fee it basically defaults to 1 because no onboarding fees have been paid. So we were going to fix that with HIP 78, but after we were discussing that, it turns out maybe we can actually fix a couple more things at the same time, and maybe we should take another look at the DAO utility score altogether. There's another component of the DAO utility score, which considers the VEHNT delegation to each sub-DAO. And in the definition of HIP 51, what it says is you look at the VEHNT that people have gotten from locking their HNT and have delegated to the different sub-DAOs. And the VEHNT is called the V component in the formula that you can find in HIP 51 is considered as a linear factor. So if one sub-DAO has twice as much VEHNT as the other sub-DAO, the V score it contributes is twice as high. And what this means in the end, if you do the math, is that if we have a whale who locks a huge amount of HNT and has a huge amount of VEHNT as a result, and delegates all of that to one sub-DAO, it basically just knocks the other sub-DAO off the table, no matter how many hotspots it may have, or no matter how much DC burn it can do with its data transfer, which are the other factors that enter into the DAO utility score. And so that's another thing. JMF brought this up actually, that we want to consider. And the final question is, it was promised when we were coming up to HIP 51 and the LoRa hotspot owners decided they would like to bring on 5G as a second network, that the LoRa hotspots would continue making a certain amount of HNT going forward, even though we hope that 5G will start using a lot more DC because it will be doing a lot more data transfer quite soon, because we think lots of people have smartphones. I've heard lots of you want to get a Helium mobile SIM card as soon as it comes out. And if we get the 5G hotspots deployed, we should be using quite a lot of data. Whereas with LoRa, we've seen things are doing pretty well, and we have partners who want to come use the network, but the amount of data being transferred still is fairly low. And since the DAO utility score in HIP 51 considers the DC burn of the different sub-DAOs, if we don't have some way to protect the investment of LoRa, it could happen that mobile would just burn so much data that the contribution of the LoRa hotspots who did the initial investment would just be wiped off the table. So what HIP 51 proposes for that is that we count the number of devices times the activation fee, which I was mentioning in the beginning. And that would give a large advantage to LoRa initially, because there are currently something like 400,000 active LoRa hotspots, and each of them is paid $40. So if you take that factor, they get a bit of protection from their initial investment, whereas mobile will just start onboarding the hotspots with a fee today if we were to start taking the fee. Right now, nobody's paid any onboarding fee for a mobile hotspot towards the mobile sub-DAO, and so this factor, the A factor in the score as defined in HIP 51, is just 1, whereas it's far higher for IoT. So on the one hand, LoRa would get protected initially, but on the other hand, mobile might be able to increase its hotspot count and its data usage so quickly that LoRa would not be able to earn any more HNT to the sub-DAO in 6 months, a year, 2 years, whenever. So after we discussed all of this, the idea is maybe we can just come up with a totally new DAO utility score, and maybe we can find a simpler one. And so what HIP 80 actually proposes is the new DAO utility score that just takes the square root of the data transmission, the DC burn on the one hand, multiplied by the VEHNT on the other hand. So we take the DC burn in the current epoch times the VEHNT delegated to the subDAO and multiply them together and take the square root of that. And that's the new DAO utility score. And so if they're looking at the math for a bit, it seems that should give a distribution that would be much more fair, considering the various ideas that have been proposed. So initially, since LoRa doesn't have any data transfer worth mentioning, LoRa would have a very low score, but mobile would begin at 0 and grow as it starts transferring data. Now, we did promise LoRa to launch with founder's bonus, if you will. So we propose an additional guarding factor in that we say we will consider LoRa to be always burning a minimum of $75,000 of DC per month. Mobile and all other subDAOs get counted at their true DC burn. LoRa gets a bonus, and when the network launches with the two subDAOs, initially most of the HNT will go to LoRa, which is what was originally promised when we were coming up to HIP 51. But we expect if mobile is successful, it should fairly soon start burning quite a lot more than $75,000 a month. LoRa currently burns about 1,500, if I'm correct. I think Arman knows the actual numbers better than I do.
Yeah, around that range, somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000 per month. So the floor would be, the proposed floor of 75,000 per month would be about 30x the current.
Exactly. And LoRa has been growing, but slowly, but we hope mobile will be growing much faster. So initially, LoRa will have a big advantage, but fairly soon, we hope, once Helium Mobile launches, the distribution to mobile would actually be above what is distributed to the IoT subDAO. So I'm afraid I haven't got anything clever prepared here because I was working on this until last night, but it's explained in the HIP, and the basic aim is to give LoRa some more runway to earn a couple % at least of the total HNT, even if the mobile subDAO is extremely successful, because we think right now LoRa will probably need some more years before it can actually get up to speed with its data transfer. Eventually, it may do actually quite a lot because there are a lot of applications that just haven't even been designed yet, let alone built. The distribution in the medium term should be with more HNT being distributed to the mobile subDAO than to LoRa, but with LoRa keeping this guaranteed base earnings, which are based on the idea that we just grandfather it in at a level of $75,000 a month. So we think if you do all the math, this should give a fairly equitable distribution between the two subDAOs. And then finally,
sorry.
Finally, since this new formula, which just considers the VHNT and the DC burn, no longer uses the A factor of the old utility score, which is the one that counts the device count and the activation fee, we get rid of the problems that got us started on HIP 78, because all these mobile hotspots have been onboarded but haven't burned any activation or onboarding fee towards the mobile subDAO, but we're not counting that. So if we can just consider them as onboarded right now, nobody has a disadvantage or an advantage from that. They can just do their work. And a subDAO has no particular incentive to charge any particular activation fee anymore because it doesn't count towards the DAO utility score. So we're just going to propose that going forward, all subDAOs have a low activation fee of $5 per device, which is intended to prevent spam. If somebody gets hold of a maker key and invents an infinite number of fake hotspots, that would be inconvenient. This way they would have to pay $5 each, but it's much cheaper than the $40 currently, and this would be an advantage both for IoT and for mobile, because we're looking at IoT hotspots that might be below $100 soon. And as we've heard, the mobile sub-DAO may soon start having hotspots based on Wi-Fi that can provide limited coverage in a room or two, and they could also be very cheap, maybe $100. And in both cases, the $40 onboarding fee we're looking at right now is much more than possibly even the components of some of these hotspots. So by lowering the fee, we can make it much more easy for people to onboard more devices and grow the network. This would also address these concerns of Sophie, that Sophie's mentioned, because what do we do about all the manufacturers that have gone away without leaving any DC behind to onboard hotspots with? Well, if the onboarding is only $5, I think that's much easier to deal with. So I think that's what's proposed, and you all go read this HIP and let's discuss it. And I'll unfortunately have to hang out somewhere else today. I won't be available. I'll be back tomorrow, but Armand says he'll be around to answer some of the questions, and I'll get back to this soon. So thanks, Valerie, and let me know if there's any questions popping up in the chat here I
Yeah.
haven't been following.
There's definitely some questions. I don't think we have any time to take them just because we're getting close to the top of the hour. Armand, do you want to say whatever your comment was, your last comment, and then we do have to move on. But thank you, Chris, and thank you, Armand, for being up here and talking about this. I know we'll have much deeper discussions.
Yes, thank you so much, Valerie and Chris. Very well explained, I think. I just want to highlight one very specific point. This new DAO utility score is a simplification of the previous one, which I think is better in pretty much every way and addresses a lot of concerns that existed with the previous one. It's much easier to think about, but I want to address one specific part of it, which is that I see people in the chat are saying, maybe 75,000 a month is a lot. How did we get to this number? It was done by basically taking the amount of IoT hotspots and the amount of mobile hotspots and comparing to what the DAO utility score, what protection the DAO utility score under HIP 51 would have given. So this formula achieves the same outcome and a very, very similar level of protection for the IoT network as existed already in HIP 51. It just does it in a much simpler way that is easier to implement and less prone to just general weirdness, and I think a lot of politics that could happen with the onboarding fee being part of the score. There were definitely gaming vectors there as well. So I don't know if Chris wants to expand on that, but that's, I think, something really.
I don't think we have time to expand, but let's move this chat over to HIP 80, and we'll move this to the chat. I'm going to document the questions in here, and then hopefully we can just kind of come back to those in the channel. But thank you, Armand, and thank you, Chris. A lot to dig into. Okay, I have Noah and Abai here. We are going to just give a short, brief overview of HIP 77. We've talked about HIP 77 a bunch. You may have seen that we did try to put HIP 77 up for a vote, and we took it down at the last minute because authors needed to make some final changes. And so they're just going to give you an overview of the changes they did add, and hopefully that means we're ready to go to a vote soon. So Noah and Abai, if you want to take up until the 50 mark, that would be great.
Sure. Abai, do you want to take this or me?
Why don't you start, and we'll keep it short. It's,
Cool.
Valerie's on time covering.
Yeah, so not too many changes here. So one change is we found out that we're going to use Pith oracles for the HNT price. But Pith is very, this is a good thing. They want to have very accurate pricing. And they're worried about the day of the migration with everything switching over, that some of their publishers aren't going to switch over in time, and so the prices might not be accurate, which is very reasonable. And so we are going to use the kind of existing way that we're doing HNT pricing, where we have, I think there's like 9 or so different members of the community that submit a price. We're going to use basically a similar methodology to that to do HNT pricing for data credit burn initially. And then we're also using that same methodology for mobile and IoT until those become available on Pith. The other change is we've proposed extending the land rush period to 10 days, just so that everybody gets guaranteed the 7 days that was promised in HIP 51. Because the problem is, due to technical and implementation reasons, the migration might be finished halfway through like a day. And so we don't want people to end up getting like 6.5 days to get the land rush bonus. So by extending it to 10 days, we basically guarantee that everyone's going to get the 7 days they were promised. We also set an explicit time for the chain halt. So we'll be doing it at 4 p.m. UTC on April 18th, which I think, as we said earlier, is 9 a.m. Pacific time. We also, we're kind of codifying the emission schedules in the HIP. So, one, you'll notice that we have a spreadsheet that's detailing the emission schedules out, 50 years from now. But two, we've also linked to the code where we've set kind of the initial emission schedules. The goal of this stuff is just to reaffirm what's already been declared in the HIPs, because emission schedules have been, changed a few times with subsequent HIPs. So do take a look at that, double check it, make sure we're correct. But that's another reason why we kind of wanted to pull the vote yesterday, because we had some things to add to that spreadsheet.
Yeah, reasonable reasons to pull. So thank you, Noah. Abai, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, the only thing on the emission schedule, it specifically, one thing that folks might notice in there is that it's specifically for mobile and for IoT only includes emissions for entities that are awarded today. So for mobile, that is, or will be rewarded, after the migration, which is hotspots and VEH&T delegators. So those two parties are who's sort of defined in code. And as new parties like mappers, like service providers, the sort of rest of the HIP, rest of HIP 53 come online, we'll have to update these. And the way this will get updated is, again, through a governance procedure. Essentially, there will be a realms proposal that says that, we'd like to upgrade these contracts to include these other rewardable entities in the emissions. So we're sort of establishing the process here as well by putting this into a HIP, having it be voted, and go through sort of a governance process, because we want to follow this going forward as well. It shouldn't be that, we can kind of change this without governance in the future.
Great. And you both are available to answer any questions about that. I think we might have some questions that will come in about this, but let's also move them over to the HIP 77 channel, and Abai and Noah, hopefully you're available to answer anything. Cool. Okay, we're getting last 10 minutes of our call. We still have 3 things to run through. So really quickly from Neil, Germ, Gateholder, would love to get an update of the work that the working groups are doing. So let's start with the IoT working group. I think we have both Jeremy and Neil from the IoT working group here. So please give us like a 3-minute, kind of what have you been working on?
I'll start off with a summary and hand it over to Neil. He's got some there. So just as a reminder what the working groups are, there are committed and passionate, recognized community members who are working together to work on HIPs to improve the processes of both mobile and IoT. And for the IoT working group, we've come pretty much to the consensus that we do need to change POC to make it so it really does effectively reward good coverage and growth And how do we do that in the most effective manner? Well, that's the topic that we're working on. I've collected several different proposals and trying to gather them together. And I'm working on writing a draft HIP that gathers, I think, the latest best ideas that we have from the group and have that draft out at the end of this week, American time. But I'll summarize some of those things. Neil's proposed an idea about reducing the time in which a witness can report back and be counted as valid, because it's not quite, right now it's 20 minutes. We may not need to be that long. I'll let Neil describe a little bit more about that. There's been a proposal to possibly drop res 4 from the HIP 17 coefficients. And I'm excited to gather both of those, or as many things as we can, into an idea of maybe having just a few hotspots per hex be rewarded, have a scheme for how that's decided, maybe involve some staking, and fully describe it and write it out as a draft, and then have the whole working group jump on as authors and help edit it if they so choose. Not everyone will, of course, agree, I think. And then that's my current job. I want to pass it off to Neil to describe his latest.
Yeah, sure. So as a group, we've kind of been looking at what changes can we affect straight away rather than rewrites of the POC system, but we're keeping that in mind as well. So whilst we think, Res 4, for example, in the HIP 17 system just doesn't give us any good metrics, we just know that we can't completely remove it without causing unexpected consequences. Like if you remove a res 4, that area benefits from it the most, right? Everyone's rewards go up. So we're digging into HIP 17 to look at how we can change those variables to improve density. I'm not sure if it's an IoT POC working group thing, but I have written HIP for the first to witness, as this kind of gives a great way in dense areas of measuring the best hotspots in terms of latency. So we reward, we give everyone the chance in a dense area of earning, but that doesn't factor in things like Wi-Fi being slower, or your hotspots further away on a windowsill or on a Wi-Fi connection with a hop. So I think moving to first to witness rewards those dense areas and focuses on the coverage that is best for sensor data. Obviously, POC has two factors to it. One is about growth and one is about replicating sensors. So it's important that we have both of those things covered. But I feel like changing HIP 17 variables and pairing it with first to witness kind of resolves that situation until we can come up with a better system to replace the whole thing. So that's what we've been up to.
Great. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Jeremy. Let's get, I think, Gateholder, you're joining us from the mobile POC working group, correct?
Yeah, me and Josh J. Hella are.
Awesome. Well, go ahead, take a few minutes and give us an overview of what y'all are working on.
Sure, Josh, if you want to start.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can get it started, and happy to have you jump in and provide color commentary. Kind of echoing how Jeremy kicked off, similar mission on the mobile side. And what's really helpful for the mobile case is that we have Boris participating and being able to give us some perspective on Nova Labs and Helium Mobile, which is kind of the SubDAO's first customer, so to speak. And so our mission has been to help improve mobile POC to help maximize useful coverage and grow the network. We've been really focused on trying to kind of break it up into smaller pieces because we don't know exactly how the market and the stakeholders within the ecosystem are going to react to some of the economic factors that we're trying to drive. And so, for example, with the mappers HIPs, we've kind of broken that into 2 HIPs so that we can get the mappers out faster and collecting data, and then sort of adapt and evolve and iterate very quickly. So the group's done a really nice job of trying to break it up into manageable pieces that we can then iterate really quickly and adapt to what we see the network doing in the wild. I think there's also some really exciting ideas beyond mappers around hex boosting, where customers or carriers like Helium Mobile and future carriers can boost areas or incentives where they see their customers aggregating, which is really exciting. And then I think finally sort of trying to drive towards useful coverage, which I thought Boris kind of defined really well as reliable coverage in locations where subscribers of approved mobile sub-DAO carriers are most likely to use for data transfer. Maybe one point I wanted to make is that although this working group committee, kind of is a little bit formal, it doesn't take away from the fact that any individuals can still submit HIPs. The chats are open during the calls, and I think we've really appreciated some of the feedback that non-working group committee members have provided, and I tried to include that in the discussion as well. Holder, if you want to add any more, kind of your perspective or anything I missed, would appreciate your perspective.
Sure. Yeah, I think you really hit a lot of it. We've had a lot of discussions regarding the mappers, lots of discussions regarding, I think, kind of the whole HIP 78 through HIP 80, kind of very, very important to obviously how we've been trying to tackle that problem. I think that I haven't had quite enough time to go through it and kind of understand everything, but look forward to the discussions going on over there as that relates to us. But as far as the mobile working group, the main things I think, like how just kind of driving oracles and how they're going to interact, like you said, with the hex boosting oracle, with traffic, with population, and then also talking about how the whole mobile ecosystem is going to start developing. But yeah, I think that's kind of the entire realm of mobile at this moment, is just trying to get everything up and running, get everything going, and trying to get everything working the best way we can.
Thank you, Gateholder. Thank you, Jay Hella. I hope that the small amount of time we just give to both of the IoT and mobile working groups does not diminish how awesome what you guys is working on and how impactful what you both are working on is to the network. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more time next month. Or in general, we would love to kind of get more regular updates, I think, from both of these working groups. So thank you for the time you just took to give us that update. We are very close to ending. We have one more update from Clarissa from the foundation team, who's just going to tell us about the status of the grants program and any open grants that you can apply for right now. So Clarissa, take it away our last few minutes. Clarissa, you might have a push to talk if you're on that. Let's see. I think you're on push to talk, Clarissa. So,
I see that she's unmuted, but yeah, I think maybe she's having an audio problem. If you want to read it, if you say it in the chat, I'll read it, and you try to read it in your voice, Clarissa.
Oh. Okay. Clarissa, I'm just
Wait,
gonna
we got something I could, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you got something, Jeremy? Go ahead.
Oh my goodness, she posted this block. Why don't you read it, Valerie?
Let's see. What did she post it in this chat? I can post later. I just see I can post later. Okay, well, we do have the grants program, the Helium Foundation grants program, still open. And there are still things that you can apply for today. So if you're running a community event, you can get funding up to $500 for the event, with 250 of that for technical experts or hardware. So that is still open today. We have a pitch for your IoT business. Oh, Clarissa just said. Let's see. I guess, wow, Clarissa, how this, I don't know if I can read all of that. But Clarissa, this looks great. Maybe everyone can go and they'll just read that themselves, and we'll put that in the notes here. But take a look at the 2023 grants program and apply through the homepage at helium.foundation/grants. Clarissa, I'm reading a little bit of this, Clarissa. Clarissa is thrilled to say that every single community event proposal we received since the program opened was so strong that every single submission has been greenlit. And we'll be celebrating these events as they happen and announce them to the community as we have them solidified. It only takes 10 to 20 minutes to apply for funding. So please submit your submissions again through helium.foundation/grants. Let's see. She wanted to tell you about Disc 91's grant to build a new Helium console. We did announce that on Twitter the other day, but yeah, this grant project is an open source solution to link router services to ChirpStack LNS. Paul's approach will enable users to simply import and manage a device fleet and further enable the Helium connectivity provider ecosystem. We still have another a device onboarding call for projects that is ready to be celebrated publicly. This is Brian from Parley Labs. We will also announce that online if we haven't already. Brian's project is an open source key management solution so that keys can safely and securely move from one owner to another and reduce the amount of keys transferred through email or Excel sheets. Excited to see the MVP that Brian will create for this grant. I think, Clarissa, I tried to get as much of that as I can in our last few minutes, but please go and read what Clarissa just posted. And again, grants are still open to apply for. So cool. We are right over time. I think my proposal for next community call is that this goes longer because I am so impressed with everything that everyone is working on that an hour is definitely not enough time to go over everything that everyone is working on. Like the depth of everything here is just absolutely incredible. Yeah, from the working groups to the HIPs to all these community grants. So yeah, this is just so massively impressive how much this community is working on, and I hope we got to give you a snapshot of that today in the community call, and we'll meet at the end of the month. Remember that the Solana migration is happening April 18th, so we'll have sort of a blackout period of the chain at that point for 24 hours. But because of the work that Seth and Victor are doing, all of data transfer continues to happen. Off-chain POC continues to happen, so you'll see your rewards the minute we're kind of live on Solana, and you'll be able to claim those right away. If you haven't migrated your Helium wallet, please do that. That's moving from the blue app to the black app, or the Helium app to the Helium wallet app. So please continue to do that. Read docs, submit PRs for us. Help us make sure that you guys have the technical documentation or other information you need. Again, just going through docs is such a big help. I know we have several of us here at the foundation kind of working to make sure that all of that documentation is clear. Join the Solana Transition AMA tomorrow afternoon. That'll be in the afternoon US time. But hopefully that means that folks in Australia can join us. It'll be a good point in time for them. What else do we have to look forward to? I mean, lots to look forward to. So thank you for joining us today. Oh, we'll have HIP 77 up for a vote, I think, fairly shortly. HIP 80, since it is dependent, it's a dependency for the migration, will also go up before the April 18 date, but sort of unclear when that is with kind of all the questions that are around it today and all the discussion that needs to happen there. So yeah, please ask questions. Please keep doing that and chat in HIP 80 and HIP 77. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Okay, bye. And Jamie, you'll have the Jamie will have the recording of this up, and we'll add that to the agenda.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.